A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India International Center. This is an ongoing series called Art Matters, which we have been running here for almost 4 years now. And earlier it used to be a panel discussion, then we converted it into a conversation between two persons. So there is a main person and there is the other person who is equally main, but her job is to make this other person talk. And the idea is that some of the more important creative minds of our time should be made to talk about their life, their vision, their struggles, their problems, or whatever their experiences. And today we have GEETA HARIHARAN in conversation with RITU MENON. GEETA HARIHARAN, as you know, is an important Indian author who won the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 1993. That's quite ancient. And those are the days where Commonwealth Prize used to matter. And of late, I have not heard of it. I mean, is it still being given?
I think it's died like the Commonwealth.
Well, but as you know, she was born in Coimbatore, grew up in Bombay and Manila, and she obtained a BA degree from Bombay and MA from Fairfield University, wherever it is. She has been working in the public broadcasting system in New York, and then with publishing firm as an editor in India. She currently works as a freelance editor and promises to become a writer after this year ends. That is what you said? You'll return to writing. And you know the winning team in time of seas, when dreams travel, the ghosts of Vasu Master, the art of dying, the 1,000 faces of night, fugitive histories, and she has edited A Southern Harvest and Sorry Best Friend. And she edits a web magazine. Is it web magazine or what magazine is it?
Well, it's actually a forum called the Indian Writers Forum.
No, that's one. And the
culture journal
called Guftagu. And we in Raza Foundation have been supporting it. See, we have a particular inclination towards the mad people, who do something out of the blue and out of the ordinary. And talking to her will be RITU MENON, whom most of us know as one of the first feminist publishers, Caliph of women. And then she has moved on and is founded Women Unlimited. And her writing has focus on violence against women. She has been awarded Padma Shri, which hasn't come to GEETA HARIHARAN. So she is the person,
and unlikely to.
And unlikely to, at least not in the next 3 years. So there you are. The rules of the game are that they would be talking for about 45 minutes. And after that, there will be some time for the audience to ask questions or respond in any way. So there you are, GEETA HARIHARAN with RITU MENON.
Not always easy to be talking to a writer who's also a friend. But I'm going to pretend that I'm not really the friend and I am the other. So
sounds ominous.
No, it's not at all ominous. I'm just trying to be a bit detached, if I can. But anyway, in addition to Ashok's introduction, I just wanted to say that GEETA has been writing for over 25 years now, and she is, in my view, one of the few writers to have had a sustained literary output. This is not as common as it might sound, nor is it as routine an accomplishment as it might appear these days, because not only does she have a sustained literary output, she has written across genres. So novels, of course, short stories, essays, newspaper columns, like all of us. She's edited children's stories. She's edited an anthology of stories from the South called Southern Harvest, which Ashok mentioned, and she's also edited a book close to her heart on Palestine and on the relationship that India has had with Palestine over a long period, a relationship that's changing, as we all know. I've tried to read almost all her work. I might have missed out one or two things, but I have been following it out of interest, but of course, as I said, also because she's an old friend. And I find that her writing, and I might add, her literary sensibility is delicate but judicious. Also not so easy to come across. And her prose is precise but limpid, fluent, like water. She keeps saying that she wouldn't be a writer if she wasn't an editor, but I'm not sure that that is necessarily the case. However, of course, she won't agree with me, so that's all right. And her subject matter is carefully chosen. This is something that I hope we will talk about. She is not, in my experience at any rate, either whimsical or self-indulgent. So she's worked with myth and fable. She's refashioned potent and familiar figures, mostly women, from myth and fable. And she's woven what she calls the strands of invention and folklore in order to rewrite. Rewrite, but also, I think, to revitalize and to invest them with new meaning, or at least current relevance or contemporary relevance, maybe. Ashok mentioned her Commonwealth Prize, which she got for her first novel. That's pretty remarkable. 1,000 Faces of Night, which takes epic characters, again, mainly women. Her novel, which sort of takes as its base the storyteller Scheherazade, is called When Dreams Travel. Her anthology of short stories, The Art of Dying, is preoccupied, of course, with death. But she also draws on and challenges contemporary myths and shibboleths. And she takes her material from reality, not fantasy. And she, I think, of late, in the last, I would say, this century, since the 2000s or maybe the late 1990s, she has been very clear-eyed about her literary as well as her political purpose. She's also quite clear-eyed about herself as a writer and as what she calls a citizen writer. This is something that I think we can talk about later when we open it up. And so the two novels that Ashok mentioned, In Times of Siege, which is about an attempt to saffronize history, and Fugitive Histories, which was written post Godhra and Gujarat 2002, are unequivocally political. So there's no fantasy, no fable, but maybe something much more urgent. GEETA says that she rejects the idea that writing and politics live in different places, and that what is indispensable to her when she writes is, and I quote, a take on power politics through the lives my characters live. So, Geeta, my first question to you is that for the first 10 years of your writing, the material for your novels and short stories was drawn from diverse sources. A sort of literary storehouse that already existed. So myth, fable, drawing on everyday lives, on adversity, on fantasy, and on those great themes of literature, death and love and, life and so on. Those were your inspiration, at least so it seemed from the writing, from the work. So when did what you call the compulsion, as distinct from the inspiration, to bring the urgent issues of our times into your literary life happen? What triggered that compulsion? As I say it,
Yes.
I sort of see it divided neatly between the first 10 years and the next 10 to 12 years.
Yes. In retrospect, of course, my first three novels, which had the tale as the the protagonist, and I say tale because they were tales, familiar tales, as well as twisted tales, and they all did something with each other.
Mm-hmm.
They added to each other, or they undercut each other, or sabotaged each other, and which is what, of course, you have when you have myth and tale, because the myth is sort of awe-inspiring and larger-than-life figures, and sort of exert power in a certain way, say the Sita myth, but or the powerful guru and so on. And then you have the tale coming in, undercutting it completely, So my interest there, I think, in retrospect, it's not that I thought this through that way. I think in a way I was interested in the, if it doesn't sound pompous, the political philosophical. What was our heritage? Because as I was getting politicized as a young woman, it was very clear to me that I was asking certain questions about the power structure. My entry point was the women's movement. But then, living in India, soon you understand that movements have to ally with each other. You can't get a sense of the multiplicity in India at any level, at the lived level, which is important for the writer, without actually looking at the multiple voices through stories, what happens to a story when it's a different storyteller, and how it changes, who's the listener and how does that change. So that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But then the multiplicity, that point of urgency was when we had a threat, an emerging threat, which didn't happen overnight, it happened over a period of time.
We meaning as a society.
Exactly. So I think in times of siege, in fact, was a very interesting turning point for me, because I had enough work to feel confident as a writer. And it's strange because the invented landscape, the invented tale and fable is a safer space actually to be in, and it was a good place for me to develop my skills as a writer, to gloss over my inadequacies and to foreground my strengths. So that was a good place. But then both reality as well as my own development meant that I had to actually write something autobiographical, not only about myself and my times, but everybody's. So it was sort of autobiography of everybody. And quite specifically within times of siege, here I was writing about a historian, professor in correspondence sort of university, something like IGNU, and getting into trouble with the Itihas Suraksha Manch. And we all know what Suraksha, as women, we know what the minute they say protection, what it means. And when I was midway through the novel, there was this controversy about the Towards Freedom volumes with Panikar and Sumit Sarkar getting into trouble. So it was really as if reality was at my heels. And it was very clear to me that, okay, this is my agenda as a writer till I find something more important. And since then, I think that's
So
where
you
I've been.
said agenda, meaning you had a very clear message or a very clear purpose.
I mean, I just message, but you know, after I wrote The Thousand Faces of Night, and you know, since I was lucky and nobody told me, please go back and sell soap or something, get yourself a job and a salary, which of course might have been good in other ways. The Art of Dying, which came second, they were my limbering up exercises. I was trying to figure out what am I going to do for the next 10 years as a writer. I'm not going to repeat myself. Everyone was very happy to say, you know, patronizingly, yes, she's written about women and, you know, she's equipped to do that because she's a woman, which is, of course, completely idiotic for a writer. So The Art of Dying was to say, you know, what am I going to do next? Similarly, I think In Times of Siege taught me that now, well, you know, I'm 62, so possibly for the rest of my life, I will be in this space.
So let me ask you then, I have another question which I will put, but before that, when you say that, I mean, you imply that that was a limbering up exercise and so it's behind you, and now that's not what you're implying. Nevertheless, you take as your material now the real world, or what you call everybody's autobiography. 1 minute, the question is, do you find that this constricts your imagination?
Oh, not at all. Because I'm not, you know, I admire journalists, God knows how they work to that kind of deadline. It takes me a long time to polish and polish. But even in my essays in Almost Home, if I'm writing about a homeless girl, for example, in Delhi, I'm not reporting. I'm, you know, bringing even to the essay, to the non-fiction form, what I have as a novelist, which is that I want to imagine what is going on in this girl's head. I want to speculate. So I think the really important link between the fables and, you know, they're all about real people, but we are not looking just at the public space. We're looking at those, you know, secret dreams and fears. So if you're talking about 2002, it's not just about victims of 2002, but the nature of the afterlife. You know, what are they afraid of now? What have they got over? You know, is there friendship in their lives? Is there desire in their lives? In other words, you know, what makes us human?
So, I want to ask you something that might seem like a rhetorical question, but it's not. Do you think writing has a nationality?
I know, this is a tough one, because now we're so afraid of any word which begins with the first part nation, you see?
No, I didn't mean it in that sense at all. I mean, I know that we are hamstrung by all this, by words that have been appropriated. No, I didn't mean it in that sense. But I meant something different. Let's say, for example, we talk of Russian literature, or Latin American, or South African. And there is a set of associations that comes with it. We don't, I mean, we might sort of speak of French, but I don't really think that they have the same, they don't carry that charge, if you like. So in that sense, would you say that, what would you say?
Well, I would unpack it in many ways. To begin with, there is the language you write in. If you are, as I am, firmly placed in India, again, I'm not using the word rooted, because that again has other messy connotations, you know, and the business of writing in English. Very early in my writing life, I felt a great sense of loss and thought really I should try and write in another language. But it was a very clear problem that my mother is Tamil speaking, Tamil writing, my father is Malayalam speaking and writing. I'm a hybrid to begin with, and then 60 kilometers apart, two states, they had to write to each other in English. And then I grew up in Matunga in Bombay. We moved 11 kilometers because my father started editing the Economic Times, and then my medium of instruction changed to English. Plus we had Marathi and Hindi. So, in other words, this gave me a certain sensitivity to language, which is key, I think, if you are going to identify yourself within the body of Indian literatures. But it's not just what you think. How you fit, how you're located in this place called Indian literatures also depends on how you are looked at. So the other's gaze is just as important. And very quickly you decide that you're not going to flog yourself in public for being forced by history and Indian diversity to write in English, just as we've stopped apologizing, being the token woman figure on a panel. So those are the things. But I think over the years, I want to add this. It's very troubling in the international forum as well as the international marketplace. Indians who write in English and who live in India, were pretty strange till perhaps Arundhati Roy, but she's sui generis, and so unless you have all that noise of the money and all that kind of thing, in a way you're not, you're really strange. So I've had everything from an agent in London telling me, but you're not writing about a recognizable other. Simply because you're not writing about another, you're writing about us. This is the only world I know. A more frank Italian publisher told me, we're only interested in sex in exotic locales. At which point a lot of my friends said, maybe we'll set up a committee and help you write something sexy every 10 pages. So, what I'm trying to say is that this thing of being part of Indian literatures finally becomes so difficult that you have it there and you argue about it with yourself on a day-to-day basis. But I feel firmly located as a writer. And I think the other languages I do lead into the work.
So that's language. So would you say that writing may or may not have a nationality, but it has to have a location?
Yes, this I think, when I was writing these essays in Almost Home, I was very clear that I was not going to write only about India. Again, it's amazing, you can write for 3-4 decades and you've still been told, why don't you write only about India? Well, I don't exist only to explain India to the rest of the world. So I said, no, I am going to write as an Indian cosmopolitan living in India. For me, the view from here is that. So if I write about Algeria, not only am I trying to understand another part of the world, but also understanding India better because of the difference of choices we made after freedom. So definitely I feel located in terms of the way we view ourselves, which is not pure Indian. We still have post-colonial baggage. We have fagged post-colonial baggage, which might cripple. Some of the earlier stuff might enrich. So that's a complicated location.
So can I ask you to read something that will maybe illuminate this complication a bit?
Okay.
But
yeah, I'm actually going to start with a simple. No, nothing is simple. I'm sorry, I take that back. I thought a little from fiction, and maybe if we have time, a little later from
that I'll ask you later, but
yeah. I planned to stand and read, but I thought, it would be silly to keep getting up. I wanted to read.
If you're more comfortable standing, go ahead. It doesn't make any difference.
I think this is because this is the only way I think of this as work, and then I'm more serious. I wanted to read 2 short passages from Fugitive Histories, which actually began because when Gujarat happened, and And so many of us who are not Gujarati, who are not Muslim, why were we so shattered? Why were we so deeply concerned? How do those stories come and sit in our heads and take us over? So I had to make reality conform with narrative strategy. So I decided to have somebody called Mala from Palakkad going to Madras and then to Bombay, and then she, who is born into a Hindu family but doesn't think of herself as Hindu, meets a man who is born into a Muslim family but doesn't think of himself as Muslim, and they have a certain vision that we had in the 60s and early 70s. And then what happens to the daughter when 2002 happens? So I'm going to read a little bit from the 60s, because the best kind of collision is, of course, a love story. So maybe two sorts of collisions. Mala is in Madras, in her parents' home, summoned to explain why she wants to disgrace them. How can you want to marry him? Asks her father, genuinely puzzled. Think of the difference. It'll always be a problem, the difference between us and them. And you said the food in Nasreen's house was so oily. Have you forgotten? Wails her mother. Her sister Sheila, already married and expecting her second child, writes Mala reams of letters. All of them begin, don't misunderstand me, but if I were you. Some days are dedicated to silent sulks, hers and theirs. Other days split eardrums with piously loud pujas or high-pitched quarrels that usually end with, you're killing us, you'll marry this man and you'll kill us. Her father waves a letter from her grandfather warning them that if they let their daughter go back to Bombay, she may fall into a trap of a love marriage. Love marriage, shrieks Mala's mother, tearing up the letter. Who's worrying about love? Back in Bombay, in Asad's dingy rented room, Asad and Mala bear the terrible burden of living up to every film and song and novel and poem and political tract on what happens when a Hindu and a Muslim fall in love. At least your family is not getting hysterical, says Mala. But Asad grumbles. A woman marrying into the community is just one more womb colonized. Their friends Seema and Ravi have been with them all day. They've had to be fed lunch, innumerable cups of tea and coffee and now rum, so they can offer their sympathy and support. Mala feels morose. Perhaps she wants them to leave, so Asad and she can be alone together. Perhaps it's the rum she's drunk. We're not doing this for national integration, she snaps at Ravi. Mala has become almost famous, at least in the neighborhood in Madras where her parents live, and among her extended family scattered across 3 continents for having eloped with a Muslim. Mala's parents clutch at straws. They summon her again to Madras so they can prove to the rest of the family that all is not lost. They assure their sudden influx of visitors that Asad's family is not religious. They're quite modern. Mala's father even adds that Asad is secular. This is a word he has just learned to use. Maybe it'll confuse family members who've never heard this clinical-sounding word before. A great-grand-aunt arrives one evening, having changed buses twice just to visit them. I hope you're happy, Mala's mother says bitterly as she prepares for the visit. She throws a new silk sari at Mala. I hope you're satisfied everyone is talking about us. Now this horrible woman is coming to look at us like we're animals in the zoo. But when the grand-aunt arrives, Mala's mother tells her firmly, they're decent people. Not like us, of course, but decent. She means rich, but she's too decent to say so. The grand-aunt is unimpressed. What do you mean decent, she sniffs, eating her 5th dosa and drinking her 2nd tumbler of coffee. You can teach him to end every meal with curd rice. But, and she sets her empty tumbler down on the floor with a triumphant ring, what will you do with that name? The grand-aunt is more discreet with Mala. She waits to corner her alone. What do they do? She asks Mala. Mala has a brief vision of herself as an expert on foreign customs, explaining the eating of meat, the offering of namaz. Or she could enlighten the grand-aunt, convert her. Can she actually carry it off? Give the scary old woman
a watered-down version of some standard liberal speech? The grandaunt can't wait. Her hand trembles as she gets hold of Mala, pulls her closer. Her breath hits Mala in the face in a sharp gust. The look on the grandaunt's face is strange, eager. Don't they do it differently? And more often? Her eyes glitter as if on the verge of discovering how to live another 20 years. How many times a night? The questions hit Mala almost as effectively as the grandaunt's breath. The old woman has gone past all those living room type doubts about food and prayer and custom. She's gone directly where this teasing mystery can be unraveled. Where else but in the smallest room of all, in the bed which fools some into believing in the sameness of all naked bodies, do you find that lascivious skin, the secret of difference? Then the two girls, the daughter that Mala and Asad have, Sara, who thinks of herself just as Sara, not Hindu, Muslim, or perhaps even Indian. And she's learning how to write a script for a film, and she's gone to Ahmedabad and becomes friends, insofar as you can become friends like that, with a girl called Yasmin, who's lost her home in 2002. What was it like, Sarah asks, where you used to live? How is Yasmin to describe home? How is she to take Sara Didi there, make her see why it's home? Yasmin shuts her eyes so she can see it all better. No, she shut her eyes so she can go home more easily, more secretly. She can only go home in great secrecy, preferably by air, because on the land she would have to cross a border that's manned day and night. The girl in the air, the Yasmin who can go home, has her eyes open. They search out the old house. It's not yet charred. It doesn't belong to anyone else yet. The street itself is not the way it was when she last saw it. It's still her street. When she's sure of this, her body frees itself from the air. Then she checks to make sure they're all still there. The small houses, the building that's slowly growing tall, the one big house painted a startling white and standing back from the street so everyone else can see it only from a distance, like a dream. But today, the White House is being particularly friendly. It winks at Yasmin as if her going away was a big joke. April Fool played as early as February. Maybe the wink is telling her that this has not really become a Hindu locality over the years, a Hindu neighborhood, as if the soil and air, the bricks and cement and trees have themselves turned Hindu. Yasmin's heart races. She's eager to be let into the joke. Could it be that there is place for them here? There were only 2 Muslim families on the street, but maybe they could have stayed on or come back. Yasmin walks down the street slowly, careful not to miss a thing. As she passes the houses, she whispers the names that go with them. It's a chant or a prayer made up of people. Botawala, Shah, Patel, Desai, another Shah, the one with the angry dog that's tied up all the time. Gupta, Sharma, the house with the Ganesh face stuck on the wall and the white rangoli painted outside the front door. Then there's Yasmin's home. It looks like a house that holds a few small and happy secrets. Yasmin tries the door gently, a thief who means no real harm. The door opens into a little room like an office. There's a man there. He's finishing the shop accounts for the day so he can go upstairs. The man, her Abba, puts away his accounts book, locks up, goes upstairs. Before dinner, he's got one more chore, but a chore he loves. It's his day for dusting his father's small collection of books. Once a week, Abba has his hour alone with the books his grandfather put in the glass-fronted cupboard when he moved into this house. After Abba's grandfather died, the house and books came to Abba's father. Now it's Abba's. It's his turn to take care of the books, to love them silently, deeply, as if the pages hold the house itself or the land it stands on. Then the books and Abba, the house and her old home, melt into the air. Yasmin is back under the tree with Sara Didi. She feels the joy of having gone back home and the pain of not having moved an inch.
That. But I wanted to ask you then, since that's the case, what specific skill do you bring to, say, the short story, or the novel, the essay? Obviously, there's a difference, and you consciously and deliberately choose the form. So, why was Fugitive Histories not a short story? And why is The Art of Dying not a novel?
Well, in a sense, honestly, you don't decide. To begin with, I have to say that the novel corrupts you a little. You know, I wrote a lot of short stories after my first novel, and not to be said in public, but really, as I said, that for me, they were limbering up exercises. Can I write from different points of view? You know, what can I do? I must try a ghost story. You know, I was giving myself exercises, and the ones that didn't turn out well, of course, are either thrown out or hidden somewhere in my scooter garage. But once I went back to the novel, and you get used to that kind of space, and within the novel, which is such a wonderfully liberating form, because you can have the tale, you can have the short story, you can have poetry, you can do all kinds of things there. You know, it's a big mansion, and you can even keep a couple of rooms shut and just hint at what's there. So that is, I would really say, the sensibility of the novelist is what lives in me now. And the short stories I've written since then, in a way, guide me. I wrote a short story about Raza, about the morning after, you know, after the and it was about her old age. Not after the 1001st night, but in old age. She's there as a widow, and what does she remember? And but I wasn't done with it. And I was so curious, because I suddenly asked myself, you know, perfectly idiotic practical questions, such as, well, they had 2 or 3 children during all that storytelling. So when she was in labor, what happened to the stories that night? You know, that sort of question, which makes you curious. And where was the sister? So did the sister take over? What were the rivalries between the sisters, between the brothers, and, you know, all that kind of thing. So I wrote When Dreams Travel, and that short story became the last chapter. So,
but could it also be a question of, you speak about the expansiveness of the novel and how it corrupts, and could it be that the short story is a much more difficult form? I mean, I think your short stories are wonderful, actually, but I mean, I'm just curious, because a lot of people say that and they keep quoting Chekhov and, you know, X, Y, Z, and saying it's really the short stories that are the...
you know, I have to be really honest and say that all of it is difficult. You can write 50,000 short stories and any number of novels, and what used to be the blank page and is now the blank screen. You know, you're practically virginal all over again. It's very difficult each time.
None of the young bloggers who rush into print would agree with you, I think. They think the minute you write a blog, you've got a book.
Well, then I'll have to speak as what I used to be, an editor in publishing. When you said this, and Nissim Ezekiel said this to me when I was 17 and thought I was a poet. You know, and it was God's gift to readers, and he said to me very kindly, he said, "This, my dear, is what is called juvenilia." And he saw the shock on my face, and he said, "Do you know what the word means?" But we remain friends.
I'm not sure one can say that to any young person anymore. I mean, because then you're ancient. Not the ancient that Ashok mentioned when he said your prize was ancient, but the other ancient.
Perhaps we're a different generation.
You've said, and I quote, you've said, the ideas I grapple with as a writer, a teacher, a mother, and a citizen all come together for me when I imagine a rich thinking life, a rich life of action. What are these ideas? I mean, of self, let me finish, of self, of
it's simple actually.
society, country, language, and what? What ideas?
It's really straightforward, so this is not going to be
So
profound
you mean
at all.
you have a simple answer to a complicated quote?
Absolutely. This is what comes of dealing with simple but not simplistic tales.
No.
I wrote The Thousand Faces of Nine. And I'm going to talk about I'm not being facetious, the specific trivial, or not trivial, but commonplace circumstance, in a way, in retrospect, tells me why it happened. I was on maternity leave the first time. I'm used to a busy working life. The baby was charming but terribly boring for conversation. And I was surrounded by women who were telling me the most extraordinary stories, some of which I cannot repeat because the men here might get shocked by what women's locker room conversation sounds like. So at that point I began...
Not locker room, labor room.
Labor room, that's right. But labor and locker room, sometimes in the same place. So, talking about feeding, so then there were a series of stories of breastfeeding, grandmothers who didn't get pregnant and the sort of things that were done to them, and a lot of laughter as well. So it wasn't, moaning and so forth, and a lot of discussion about men, which was absolutely delightful, hearing some of these old women really cut down men to size. So that was, in a way, the world I was living in for quite a while. And so I began writing that, and it was perfect. So I didn't, in fact, go back after maternity leave to my full-time job. And so I could make this commitment, which, of course, in our days was a very important thing because it was so important for us to earn, and we're not going to listen to our parents or do anything they expected us to. We certainly had to underwrite that. So that was that. Now, the Ghost of Vasu Master, and especially because Ritu mentioned this about the mother, I wrote about a teacher who really learns what teaching and learning are about after he's retired, and he throws out textbooks, syllabus, and so on. And to be honest, since my sons are not here, I have a rather extraordinary son, my younger one, who found everything idiotic in school. But, he was very happy he loved question stories. So when I told him the mix-up between husbands and brothers' heads, the transposed head story, and he said, oh, I know, the rule of these sort of stories is that they'll say the head is more important than the body. So I said, oh, you don't have to go to school today. So then it became, I was telling him certain question stories every night. This was being at that point an ambitious mother. I didn't have television, so I had to tell them these stories every night. So,
but you read books?
We had books, and they had somebody who told them stories and acted them out. I mean, they heard the Mahabharata with me acting it out, So that was the connection, the challenge to how do you actually teach somebody who is reluctant within the conventional system, So for me too, it was, a lesson in, and that's perhaps the most autobiographical of my novels, and nobody believes it because it's told from the point of view of an old man.
Well, talking of autobiographical novel, the book of essays, Almost Home, is actually the closest you've come, I think, to autobiographical writing. I mean, I'm not taking seriously your comment that it's everybody's autobiography. But this is the closest you've come to it. And you say it's about, it's about all kinds of homes. It's about multiple homes and in-between homes and pretend homes. and searching for homes, maybe also about homelessness. So, what is home for you? Because you're not a literary nomad. So, where is home?
Everyone's autobiographies in times of siege. This one actually, I think I began. It's autobiographical in the sense that I'm clearly the narrator. But the first chapter, which is called 7 Cities in Any City, talks about the places.
Oh, you're
I
not just
lived
a
in.
narrator. You're there. You're
Yeah,
in
I'm
many
there.
of the places.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so
I
you're
am.
physically there,
Absolutely,
present.
absolutely. But so it's my story along with everybody else's stories and some imagined stories. Because, what's the point in talking about Washington if you don't talk about Washington's pronouncements on slavery and his actual, his real life story of what he did with his house slave. That sort of thing. But to come back to what you're asking, now of course I've lost the question.
No, I mean there's a sense of place in each of these
Yeah,
because of
yeah.
course they are located in very particular countries or cities or centuries or history and so on and so forth. So to me it seemed like it was you who was sort of exploring these places, if you like, but exploring in a very wide open way. At the same time, they are about you as well. So when you called it almost home, what did you mean?
Well, from the beginning, from the very first chapter, what I've already mentioned, that each of us has this very layered, complex kind of background, whether in terms of language, whether in terms of where we are located in India. So even before you venture out into the larger world or the world outside India, you already have a kind of, what shall I say, a live site for argument and debate. I mean, if at 12, of course, I wasn't that precocious, if somebody had asked me, where are you from, or who are you, I wouldn't have known how to explain it, because here I was a Palakkad Iyer who grew up in Bombay, first in Matunga, and these were the years when the Shiv Sena was actively victimizing Tamilians, and then suddenly becoming a kind of Bombayite, those days it was Bombay, in South Bombay. So what already you were quite confused, both in a sort of colluding.
I mean, you were
way,
a modern urban Indian, which is a confusing thing.
Which is a confusing thing, but also a very enriching thing, because it alerts you very, very early to the hybrid nature of our existence. That on a day-to-day basis, every transaction of ours involves more than one language. It involves, drawing on, so we can react to certain registers, if you like, in terms of symbols and image, which work in North India, which work in South India. So already there was that mix.
But at a subconscious level.
Of
I mean,
course,
it's not.
of course. And then, of course, I was 12 going on 13 when we moved to Manila. My parents moved to Manila. And that, I think, was quite important, because suddenly this business of being Indian, and I jokingly say that as a 13-year-old, I realized there's nothing wonderful about our great past, whether they knew cosmetic surgery or not. But to boast endlessly about our past as a child was terrible, because 30 classmates and, immediately I was saying, Senorita HARIHARAN, explained the caste system and transmigration of souls to the class. And I came home and said, I'm not even sure I want to be Indian, because the caste system, which we still have trouble figuring out. And as for transmigration of souls, I left it behind a long time back as something I'm never going to understand.
So is India almost home or home?
I think almost home is a condition that I am in a particular way, but also many other people are in so many ways. So what is home for the Palestinians who are not
At
in
home.
occupied Palestine? What is Palestine for the Israeli Arabs in historic Palestine? What is Algeria for the women who fought, carried bombs and fought during the war, and then had to die in exile because of the kind of national model they chose, model of the nation they chose? What is almost home? I would say the linking thread is every city thinks, every city using the word as country, nation, whatever, that justice, we founded on justice, and then you have freedom. So in Kashmir, for example, I found it's not that there was consensus on what is freedom, what azadi means, but there was definitely empirical consensus on what is not freedom, what is the absence of it. So in a way, that's why almost home. So it's a kind of work in progress, and the homeless girl I spoke to in Delhi, she said, for her, her idea of home is a home, she wants a little home in Shimla with a tree outside with no leaves, only branches, and nobody around that house should know who she is, and she should not know them. You have to be a novelist then, not a cliche non-fiction
sure.
person to
Yeah.
understand that, to decode that.
You want to read a bit from there? Small bit?
Yeah, I'm going to read a really small bit. I was hoping to read about the Delhi God, but since we are all suffering from the Delhi God these days, I don't think you need reminding. This is a section called Naming Home, Staying Home, 1982-2013. I've lived in Delhi for about 30 years now, and I should call it home. This word, home, so easy to say, so casually said every day. Why then is home so hard to see, the way you see other places you visit for a week or two? Places I left behind 20 years back still come together to make sense, as if I can see them whole from above. The place of childhood thrives in my memory. It flourishes in my dreams. But the home that is, a single home, a singular Delhi, resists a definitive biography. Maybe too many people have written of the city's standing monuments, distracted by their hoary stories of brick, stone, and marble. Maybe too many people in Delhi live in Delhi for years, but do not think of themselves as Dilliwalas and Dilliwalis. Maybe it's this business of being a capital, the strain of being unity in diversity for all the nation, what boastful Indians and lazy foreign journalists like to call the world's largest democracy. Maybe the city knows, despite its formal salute to democracy in the police-permitted spectacles of protests at Jantar Mantar, that it has trouble keeping its promises. There is an old story about this promise, though they didn't refer to democracy in those days, but to its inner skin, justice. In the mid-11th century, a ruler called Anandpal set up 2 stone lions like gatekeepers to his palace in Delhi. A bell hung between the lions. Citizens who sought justice could ring this bell. Once a crow struck this, but Anandpal decided that even the lowly crow was a citizen who must be taken seriously. A goat was killed, and the crow could go back to being its bold self, picking meat between the teeth of lions. Hundreds of years later, Delhi has its crows, its blocks of stone, its pretend lions. There are good days still, when the city seems like a grand, ambitious palimpsest, with enough room for more Delhis, for more exiles and outsiders, refugees and migrants, rulers and ruled, Rajpat and Janpat. But most days, the city leads its own life like the more cruel face of nature. The people living in it wrestle endlessly with it, taming it into a semblance of home. That's exactly where we are now.
One last question, then we'll
Yes.
open it up. I was struck by something that Elena Ferrante told an interviewer. She said, and I'm quoting, she says, "I've always had a tendency to separate everyday life from writing. It seems likely that making a clear separation between what we are in life and what we are when we write helps keep self-censorship at bay." Have you ever experienced this separation? I mean, are your many selves always in sync with each other? I mean, is there anything you would not write, could not write?
Yes, you know, you're limited
Don't
by your
answer
ability.
the last one first.
You're limited by your voice.
No, answer the
and your
first one
ability.
first.
The first one, okay, she's being very stern. I don't think so.
No, everything is always in
It's
harmony.
not so much in sync or harmony. Of course, you know, there's no such thing. We wouldn't be writing if we were so harmonious. Then I would, you know, start a new kind of mental engineering and be a little god woman.
No, I was intrigued by your inclusion of mother. Writer, mother, teacher, citizen. I mean, these are very
Yes.
charged and
Yes.
very.
Yes.
So that's why I'm asking.
Let me put it this way. I think for me, my life as a writer is nothing independent. It has very much to do with what I feel strongly about. It has to do with what I have high stakes in. So if I'm writing about, you know, about the fugitive histories, or if I'm writing this essay on Delhi, it's because I have high stakes here. And it's not just for myself, but because I've produced these children. So for me, it's a completely direct. So as a citizen, how can I divorce myself as a citizen from being a mother? You know, so it is, you know, when they will say, women and children also said, in a kind of, you know, like the vulnerable, which is ridiculous, because we are actually teaching our children how to be citizens. We're giving them that framework of values, and that we got, that we had, that this is what India was going to be about, and you make mistakes, as I describe when I go to Kashmir. You know, all of us went to that kind of love in Shimla is all very well, but you know, love in Kashmir is the best. That kind of Bollywood Kashmir, and then we develop, we become adults, regardless of where we were born, we make certain choices, and that's what you help your children toward. You know, so I would definitely say it's very high stakes, and that's why my first novel is set in a kind of South Indian Brahmin context, because this is a context I know very well. So only in that sense is it autobiographical, because this is a place I know well, that music still moves me, but I reject much of what that music says. So we are always, so there's no question of sync at all.
So then it's a yes and no question.
Yeah,
answer.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on that note of yes but not yes,
Contradictions
we
unlimited.
can we can open it up, and it's for everyone to put lots of challenging. Yes, please. Here. There we go.
Okay, let me introduce myself first. I'm Mala Thakur, a writer like you, where I live in Toronto, Canada, and teach there, creative writing. So I was really impressed by your explanation of this two-continent issue, and also by the language you used and the feeling you immersed it all in. Yes, the social fabric we live in is kind of all-inclusive. That's great. My always, as a poet and a writer and a playwright, I've always had this strand of infusing the personal into whatever I write, whether it's the way I see things or perspective. So how do you feel about putting different perspectives into the short story, or into the essay, or into the novel? Is it just your perspective, or is it perspectives of the times?
Well, I think it would be very limited if you only put in your perspective. In fiction, after a while, you know, when you're making notes, you might say, you know, I remember I was going for a walk and I saw this woman with a very, very, very wide parting. It's sort of, you know, it was almost as if there were two countries and a no man's land, you know, almost like India and Pakistan. So that's an image, you know. A lot of what you see, what you've heard, what you misheard, very important childhood memories, a lot of it you've got wrong. But you know, what you got wrong is actually more interesting. What I think of is a well-constructed lie, which helps you to get to the truth. So it's not really your perspective. You know, honestly, if I had such a well-developed perspective, I would have a more useful job. Living in Delhi, I'd have a sarkari job and a pension. I only have questions, honestly. Of course I have views, but they're weighed down with questions. You've already heard us coming out with the, you know, the ambiguities and the ambivalences that and you also people your fiction and your non-fiction with a lot of people you don't approve of, a lot of people you're puzzled about, you know. So in Almost Home, I have a section where de Tocqueville, who's considered, you know, this great spokesman of democracy in America, why is he so different about Algeria? You know, he argues with other thinkers of his time about the importance of equality, but why does he only limit that to white Europe? Why is equality mapped in terms of geography and color? Now, you know, so I don't know, I might have a drink with Tocqueville and try and, you know, figure him out, but I wouldn't be his friend, I think. You know, so perspectives, it's not yours. You're asking questions, you have to let the whole world come and speak there.
Right. Thank you.
No hands up.
Is every day.
We made the mark, that shows.
So, so let me ask you one then. Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marquez said that every writer has a public life, a private life, and a secret life. What's your secret life?
Okay. I'm going to answer this in two different ways. The second one will be ambiguous and you will have to read it yourselves. My secret life is music, a lot of Carnatic music, which I actually used to sing.
But why is that secret?
It's secret because I don't want to impose that on other people. You know, Delhi is not like Chennai. When I was a young woman and I had music lessons in Chennai, when I finished, I would find a tray of hot food waiting for me outside. And at first I thought maybe they're hinting that I should keep my mouth full, eat and, you know, not sing. But it turned out that they, you know, were very admiring of somebody who worked all day and then sang in the evening. No, my secret life is conversation with friends, arguments, music.
That's not secret, Geeta.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you want to run away and, you know,
Okay.
something that you...
I am going to actually tell you the secret life and a parting present also, a question story, the sort my son used to like. This may not be so appropriate for him at that age, but this is from When Dreams Travel. A young woman, ripe as a luscious plum, with breasts like full pitchers turned upside down, was wooed by a young man. He came to her and said, "Come to me, and I will satisfy all your desires." She didn't refuse, but was too frightened to let him touch her. "Listen," he told her, "I know you'll be in trouble if you take a lover and your people find out. So I'll use a bit of magic I know. The child you conceive will be born out of your pretty shell-like ear. You'll still be blameless where it matters the most." The young woman agreed and moved towards him shyly. They made love all night long, and as he had said, she had a delightful little son out of her ear. Months went by, and the woman had another admirer. This one enjoyed her eager but artless embraces so much that he gave her a slave, an obedient little slave who would be with her as long as she lived. The woman's life became free of all drudgery. The slave did all the boring housework, dressed her and combed her hair, and saw to the feeding of the year-born child. Her next lover was a poet. He sang complicated, image-laden praise to her elbow and the arch of her foot and her virtue. When he tenderly persuaded her to get rid of her clothes and come to bed, he promised her that she would turn into a sparkling star when she died. She would be immortal. He was so delighted with their night together that he added a more practical gift, a pot that would never be empty of food. Patient, there's only one more lover. Her fourth lover was a hermit who was passing by. She was the first woman he had slept with in 150 years, and naturally it was a night he would remember for another 100-odd years. The morning after, he said to her, "I'm going to give you a special parting gift. Be always what a man desires." His eyes caressed her from head to foot, and the same instant she felt folds of her skin stretching and tightening, a pull here and a smoothening there, and an extra ounce or two attaching itself onto her breasts and hips. What is the best lover's gift the woman received? Ritu will
Now,
take the answer.
that's the so that is secret life plus fantasy. It's open in case anyone has been excited enough by that last ambiguous, not so ambiguous.
Is there anyone asking anything? Any comment?
In this age of e-writing, where the fictional writing is heading towards from the 20th century to 21st century?
I don't think, if we hadn't got the printing press, we wouldn't all be sitting here, some more middle class than others, reading books, writing them, publishing them, having access to them. So I don't think we need fear technology. We only need to fear ignorance and intolerance toward creative work.
What about
I don't
attention
think
deficit?
e-writing is about writing. E-writing is about technology.
Yeah.
It's not about writing.
I mean,
A lot of people mistake technology for creativity, but it's only an enabler. There's something
in
here?
North America, there's an epidemic of attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity in the classroom, and
I think they're recording, so.
okay. In North America, there's an epidemic of ADHD, hyperactivity, and attention deficit disorder, and it's affecting people's ability to do not only things in the classroom, but in their whole life. And it's affected things like the 3 R's and arithmetic. And so I guess I'm wondering, how is that affecting people's ability to read novels? Novels, we have these chapter indigos in Canada, where I'm from, and it's Barnes and Noble and all these big bookstores in the U.S. But they're full of all these glossy books and not so glossy books. People are still buying volume of books, but are they really reading them? And the ones that they're reading, they're reading the cheesy novels, the ones that are formulaic stuff that sells, as opposed to the deeper things.
I'm not going to talk about the young and their limited attention span, simply because I don't want to yet place myself in that. It's very tempting to say you've lived long and so we did it better. It's true there's a great deal of information, and the difference between information and knowledge is often seems a little tricky. But in America, the niche book market is coming back. When I was there in March, I was told a lot of the smaller publishers and the small bookstore, the local bookstore, is coming back, which is of course something for us readers and writers to celebrate, because we would like very much, sometimes we don't have a choice, and we are published by great big whales with people behind the whale who we don't really approve of or agree with in terms of worldview. But you know, that's how capitalism is. You're part of it. So I don't really think it's a question of books ever dying out or storytelling ever dying out. Of course, there's going to be, you know, flirtation with other forms, and we find new links. I mean, the film, which is such an important medium now, and we couldn't do without it, has a particular relationship with the book. And also, I don't want to really separate, what shall I say, literature from pulp in that way. There are good books and bad books. So within the genre, I mean, there is, you know, it's like good, really well done French fries. Of course, you can't live on a diet of French fries, but you can get better French fries than oily, horrible French fries. And that's how I think of pulp, you know, what we've considered as pulp fiction. The important thing is when the balance goes. And that is something I think we should worry about in Indian publishing today, that of course we all know that you have to make ends meet, you have to even get a little profit, so you can also publish what you know is the point of publishing. But you can't have an imbalance, so you just throw out the you know, the kind of non-bestseller, questioning, challenging literature.
Just to follow up on this, e-books, the internet and the digital economy and everything, the influence that's had on the marketplace and on books and the arts and what qualifies as commercial and saleable and readable. E-books, the other thing I want to say about this is censorship and self-censorship, because these publishers of the e-books, e-commerce, are censoring classic novels, taking certain things out. And there's a political correctness movement, and take Huckleberry Finn as an example, and take out the N-word that's in there probably 110,000 times, and just censor it out, put out an e-book which is politically correct for the marketplace and palatable for a new generation of people, but the old generation are not necessarily satisfied with that, and the young generation don't know what they've missed. So
Yeah, well, that's a particular sort of question, but to be honest, as far as censorship goes, I'm more preoccupied with the other forms of censorship that we are seeing now. Two sides of the question. One is, of course, that the internet is a great space for putting up what has been censored in its hard copy form, whether it's a film or a book. Somebody will put it up on the net, which is wonderful. Then that's using the potential, the democratic potential of the internet space. On the other hand, a little regulation and political correctness would do us all a lot of good, given the sort of things people say on the internet, mainly because they can be anonymous and say the most extraordinary things about people, women in particular, simply because they disagree with your point of view. So, you know, what they really say, you know, what they're giving vent to is a kind of really crude hate speech. So I'm actually much more concerned with that. You know, we all fight different parts of this big mosaic-like fight. And it's like saying, you know, our family papers will not allow you to use a four-letter word in say, a story. We had a writer who came to us, to the Indian Writers Forum, to say they wouldn't let me use four-letter words. So I said, okay, I agree with you. I simply don't think that's our priority right now, you know, the right to use a four-letter word in a family newspaper, because we have other forms of intimidating kind of censorship to fight right now.
Well, friends, I suppose with that we come to the end of the evening. On behalf of the Raza Foundation and the India Institute Center, we are very grateful for this very interesting conversation between RITU, MENON and GEETA HARIHARAN. The next in the series will be on 14th December, and I've been running it as the kind of a moderator for almost 4 years. So I have decided to be a little immodest next month, and I'm going to figure in the conversation myself, except that I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about Syed Raza, the great painter who died a few months ago, and Sabah Hassan will be talking to me, and it is called the Raza, on the Raza path. So those of you who are interested in knowing about a great painter through me are most cordially invited on the 14th. This is the same space, same time. The tea or the coffee, both of them quite bad, I think. But this is what it is here, available.
The biscuits are
come by
nice.
6:15, and then we'll have them. Thank you very much. And the flowers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.